Fellow secretaries, good morning. I'm happy to join you through technology, although it would have been better if I were with you physically, but better half a loaf than none. I've been asked to share my brief thoughts with you on a subject that is evergreen, the subject of leadership, and specifically ethical leadership and its value in legacy. Today, as we engage in this conversation in Kenya, in Africa, and one day I say in the world, there is a sense in which there is a crisis of leadership. What we call leadership does not quite fit in what is desired, whether it is at the political level or at the professional level. Calling into question, what is it that is not happening right? And it is very easy to fall in the trap of equating leadership with occupation of position. Particularly in Kenya, we are in the habit of referring to politicians as leaders simply because they have been elected into public office. I do not belong into that space where the mere occupation of office requires and demands of us to characterize an individual as a leader. If you look throughout the ages, outside of the political arena or even within it or even the business arena, the men and women who have contributed in a manner that is celebrated today are men and women who have not necessarily occupied any public office. I'll give a few examples, some of whom are known, some of whom are not. But let me start with the known ones. If you look to India, Mahatma Gandhi is celebrated as the founder of the Indian nation. Mohandas K. Gandhi, as he was known later, the Mahatma, great soul, never occupied any public office. In fact, he is celebrated that on the eve of India's independence, he midwifed or attempted to midwife a relationship that would have prevented the partition of India by bringing in Jawaharlal Nehru, who became the first Prime Minister of India, and Muhammad Ali Jinnah, who became the first Prime Minister of Pakistan, and told them, don't partition India. He himself did not want public office. And today we remember him fondly. That is leadership. Leadership that is ethical, leadership that is capable of recognizing that service to humanity is what is important rather than the occupation of public office. Another leader that we often mention in the same vein is Martin Luther King Jr., the civil rights movement fighter. That is a leader whose claim to fame is justified on the basis that he sacrificed his life in order to improve the quality of the lives of others, irrespective of their color and race. And one can go on and on. Marcus Garvey, long before the gentleman I've talked about were born, was a leader in that class. If you go to the Democratic Republic of Congo, you meet a lady that we don't talk about as much as we should, Donna Beatrice or Kimpa Vita, who was a religious leader. These were individuals who are inspired by the desire to do good. And examples are legion, but perhaps this is not the occasion to give so many examples, but suffice to say that the individuals I've mentioned are individuals who have contributed to the societies in a manner that has remained in our minds because they served selflessly. Much more recently in the political arena, we remember somebody like Julius Kambarage Nyerere of Tanzania, whose leadership was sacrificial. And it always gladdens my heart that this particular individual, Julius Kambarage Nyerere, who left office at the age of 65, and who, during the struggle for independence, had actually said that he wanted Kenya, Uganda, and Tanzania to regain independence as one country. And he very readily said, I did not want to be the president. I wanted Jomo Kenyatta of Kenya to be the first president of East Africa because he was older than us. And if he chooses, the only thing that I would have desired is to be the representative of East Africa at the United Nations. Leaders of that kind are very rare in this part of the world. Of course, in the professional level, perhaps we don't speak about lawyers, we don't speak about doctors, we don't speak about accountants in the same vein. But leadership must be seen to transcend politics. And if then that is the truth, the question that we must ask ourselves is, what is it that defines leaders who create a mark in their lives and in the lives of others? It is ethics, their conviction, their desire to do that which is good and right, simply because it is good and right. As I speak to you, you can see the photographs that are behind me. At the extreme end is Patrice Emery Lumumba of the Democratic Republic of Congo. When he had been imprisoned, he said, in his letter to his wife, Opango, Josephine, he said, I know that I'm going to die, but I die in the knowledge that the people of Congo will tell their story. Patrice Emery Lumumba died at the age of 36, sacrificial, and we remember him to date. The next photograph is that of Nelson Mandela, who spent 27 years in jail. When he came out, he said that what we must do is to forgive. And we remember Nelson Mandela fondly. The next photograph is that of Julius Kambarage Nyerere of Tanzania, about whom I've talked. And he remains in our minds because he was ethical. He did the right things because it was right to do right. The final picture is that of the Osagyefo, Dr. Kwame Nkrumah, one of the most foremost Pan-Africanists in the history of contemporary Africa, and who very early on in 1950s and through to 1963 stood for only one thing, the desire to do good for the African people. So, what is ethics? I'm not going to get into the philosophical, intellectual definition of what ethics is, but I'm simply going to say it is ethical, that which is good and right because it is good and right. And he or she is ethical who does what is good and right because it is good and right. If then that is what being ethical is all about, the question that we must ask ourselves as professionals is, whenever we engage in any activity, are we doing it because it is good and right? The contemporary understanding of the old principle of Ubuntu, which is now describing how we should relate with one another, says, I am because you are. And that is ethics, and it's not new. If you go to the holy books, you go to the Hindu Mahabharata, and you go to the Hindu Gita, you see the spiritual dimension of doing that which is good and right. And if you go to the Christian Bible, the whole idea of the Good Samaritan, the whole idea of loving your neighbor, if you go to the Quran, the whole idea of being your brother's keeper, if you go to African traditional religions, and you see the whole idea of doing things that are in the best interest of all, give a spiritual anchorage to the issue of ethics. And when you behave ethically, those who live with you, who are your contemporaries, may not see it. But history does not forget you. I do not know how many of you here have watched the film Samson and Delilah. If you haven't watched it, and if you have, watch it again. And it's only one line that I want to use in that film. When Samson has had his eyes gouged out through the shenanigans of Delilah, and he is being made to work for the Philistines, one person rises and looks at him and he says, if this man is of God, his story shall be told for 1,000 years. I think what he meant is that his story will be told forever. And this story tells me that when you are a person of legacy, when you do things that look to the future rather than to the present only, then you will be remembered fondly by history. But remember that you can also engage in unethical behavior and will remember your notoriety. So the choice is yours. The story is told in Greece of old of a young man called Herostratus. Herostratus lived an unremarkable life, and in order to be remembered by history, he decided to do something for which we have never forgotten him. He decided to burn the old temple of Artemis, or a cathedral. So you can burn cathedrals and we'll not remember you because you are unethical. But if you want us to remember you for your ethics, you must take a solemn vow that you are going to do that which is good and right. And we who are in the professions, particularly in this country, where we have sacrificed good at the altar of evil, it is our duty to redeem ourselves, so that the meeting that you have today, it should not be just an annual jamboree at which we massage our egos and feel good. It should be an opportunity for reflection, an opportunity to search our hearts and minds, and to answer uncomfortable questions, to ask ourselves, as a secretary, an accountant, lawyer, arbitrator, how have I served, and how do I continue to serve? And I want to conclude with these words to be found in the Christian Bible, in the book of the prophet Joshua, chapter 24. When the Israelites have crossed and they are still in Egypt, physically they have left Egypt, but Egypt is still in them. They are headed to the promised land. Moses is dead. Joshua is leading them. And Joshua convenes a meeting at Shechem and tells them, before we crossed the Jordan, our fathers used to worship their gods, and when we crossed over and we are living in the land of the Amorites, you worship their gods. Choose you now what you shall do. As for me and my house, I shall worship the Lord. You don't need to be a Christian, you don't need to be a Muslim, you don't need to be religious, but I'm asking you, choose you now what you shall do. Shall you do good, or you shall engage in evil? The choice is yours. As for me, I recommend that we be ethical. And being ethical, as I said earlier, is doing that which is good and right because it is good and right. God bless you. Have a good weekend.